You're listening to the Centennial Interview Series, celebrating 100 years of faith and community as we look back on the history of Myers Park United Methodist Church and the people who've shaped our story.
So Sarah, tell us about yourself, your family, how you got first involved here at Myers Park United Methodist Church.
When Tommy and I got married, we moved to Charlotte, where he grew up. And he was a member at Myers Park Methodist Church and just assumed that is where I would come to church. Being the sweet, dutiful wife that I was, I agreed and came to Myers Park quite reluctantly. It was bigger than the town I grew up in. I didn't know anybody. It was not Baptist, and I was a Baptist, but I kept coming because this lovely lady sat behind me every Sunday. And when the service was over, she would come over and hug me and tell me that she was so glad I had been here. I had no idea who she was, but every week I think I came back to church just so I could get a hug from her. I found out later that it was Mrs. Ross Pewitt, who had been a member of this church since almost its beginning. And interestingly enough, I've never known her first name until about 2 days ago. I came across it in the archives. She was Miss Jenny, and she is the reason that I kept coming back Sunday after Sunday. Then I met Hardy Tippett when I was registering our children for preschool, weekday school. And Hardy called me a few days later, and he said, "I want to talk to you about teaching Sunday school." I said, "Hardy, I can't teach Sunday school at Myers Park Methodist. I'm a Baptist, and I don't know how to do that and be a Methodist." He said, "I thought you told me that you were a school teacher." I said, I am. I taught fourth grade before my children were born." He said, "What did you major in college?" I said, "Religion." He said, "So you are a religion major with a North Carolina teacher's certificate, and you don't think you can teach Sunday school?" So Hardy talked me into teaching Sunday school, and that's kind of the rest of the story. Our children were involved here, like Tommy said. He was involved. We started going to the builder's class, except I never went because I was always teaching Sunday school. And things just evolved, and the first thing I knew, I was working here. And I worked at Myers Park for 30 years, became the director of children's ministries here until I retired. There were days, there were things I didn't want to do and places I'd rather be, but I don't think I ever walked into this building and was not filled with joy at being here and being a part of this church.
What are some memorable events or meaningful events during your faith journey, and also how have you been involved in ministry here as an adult?
I think one of the earliest times I was struggling with that faith journey was when time came to baptize our first daughter, Catherine. I didn't quite understand why we baptized infants because I grew up in a tradition where you had to make that decision yourself. But Gil Adams talked to me and explained to me what baptism is in the Methodist tradition. And as soon as he started telling me that, I started thinking, that's right. That's okay. Then I'm okay with her being baptized. And the same with Charles and Susan when they came along. It became a beautiful symbol of God saying, "These are mine. These are my children." But it took somebody sitting me down and talking to me, and that was Gil Adams who did that. My involvement has been mostly, I guess, in Christian education and spiritual formation. That's what I love to do. Teaching children in Sunday school and then being involved in youth ministries, music ministries, children's ministries. Vacation Bible School is my favorite week of the year and still is, even though I'm retired. Just the stories that I could tell with some of these children, they just warm my heart. So many of these children are still members here, and I love the fact that they will come up and say, "Oh, hey, Miss Sumner, how are you?" I remember telling one young mom, because the people who didn't know me when they were young would call me Sarah. But I had one young mom who just kept calling me Miss Sumner, and I finally said to her, I said, "Lisa, everybody else calls me Sarah. Just call me Sarah." She said, "Oh, no, that doesn't sound right." So it's a joy to see those children who are now adults with their own children. And I think that's something about a big church that people don't realize. Most big churches, you don't see that family tradition going through for 2 and 3 generations, but you do see it here. You have to be really careful what you say about somebody because you don't know who they're related to. But I think that's just, that continues to be a joy, is to see these adults whom I knew as children. So that's really, I think, has been my major involvement, is spiritual formation. I do love the builder's class. I was president of the builder's class for 3 years. I told them I wasn't used to being with people whose feet could touch the floor when they sat in big people chairs, but it was a delight. I loved standing up in front of those dear friends and seeing all that gray hair and just those beautiful smiles. It was great. Still is great.
And part 2 maybe of this is tell us how you've been involved here with the 100 years history centennial celebration, and why you chose to do all this research that you've done for our history.
I'm not real sure how I got so involved in the 100-year celebration of Myers Park Church, but I am so glad that I did. We have a great book for the first 50 years, written by Mildred Gwynn Andrews. Great detail. The second 50 years is certainly not as much detail as she wrote the first 50, but it is just a history filled with stories of wonderful things that people have done in Jesus' name. And I want those stories to be remembered. I found a quote that from Gil Adams again in 1997 when they were beginning to talk about the 75th anniversary. And Gil said, "You have one generation to write these stories and remember them. And if you don't take advantage of that, then you lose the stories." So I feel like some of us who are involved in the 100th anniversary are the generation that's got to get these stories written down and told. There have been some missteps. Of course there have been. We're just people who are striving toward perfection, as John Wesley would say. But for the most part, these have been good days, these 100 years. They have been good days for Myers Park. I certainly think that Charlotte, North Carolina, the world is a different place because of Myers Park Methodist. So I've spent a lot of time cleaning up the archives room. That's one of my favorite things to do, is clean up and just exploring what has gone on and what those results have been. I love the story in Joshua where God tells Joshua to take the stones out of the Jordan River as they're crossing the river. And Joshua says, "Why?" And God says, "Because when your children ask what these stones are doing in this pile, you can tell them what God has done for you." And that's what I want these stones at Myers Park to do, is to tell our children and our children's children, this is what you have done in Jesus' name. This is what God has led you to do. And I think that's my dream for the next 100 years, is for us to remember what the stones are all about.
Is there anything else that maybe we didn't bring up, we didn't talk about, that you'd like to share in the milestone of the church's history? Anything else? Any other topics?
Like I said, I loved working here. I loved working with the staff, and I feel like I've just been so greatly enriched in my own life from knowing so many of the people who have been on this staff for so many years. You can't talk about Myers Park Methodist Church without talking about Betty Edwards. And what a delight it was to work with Betty, who was our church receptionist and who worked here for 52 years. I'm not sure anybody will reach that unless maybe Rochella Manus does, because I think Rochella was about 3 when she started working here, and she's been here 36 years. But just the deep friendships and love that I have for the staff people, some who are not going to have their name on a plaque or anything. They weren't necessarily clergy, although clergy has been wonderful, but Rebecca Simpson, who worked in the kitchen for so many years and taught me how to cook cabbage so it tasted the way hers did, or Dot Nichols, who worked in the kitchen, the people who worked with me in children's ministries, Kristen Surratt, and just so many others, Allison Ware. Just having those close friendships, they have just meant so much to me, and I hope that the staff now, who I think is just wonderful, and I just love aggravating them and having a good time with them. This church is very blessed. Everybody on this staff has been called to be here. I truly believe that, because I just don't think you would do it if you hadn't been called to be here. Walter Ball said it was tough working with Christians, and he was absolutely right. But it is a beautiful thing when you pull together as a staff and you get it done. We Americans think 100 years is a long time. Most places around the world don't, but we do. And it is a long time when you start writing a little bit about every one of those years. I'm excited that this church will be here for another 100 years. I know that will be the case, and I'm excited for the stories that will be told 100 years from today. Happy birthday, Myers Park.